Kokolioko, chicken they crow for day.
Just start from here.
Initial Development, investment consultant.
Branko Tama, general contractor.
James Sanigua, Global African Food, we met earlier this morning.
Kula Parker, financial advisor, Mutual Omaha.
I'm Jenny Figuri, I'm the owner of our travel and tours.
Thomas Tama, broker, CG Realty.
Charles Guamino, Voices Magazine. Winfred Russell, Acer Inc.
I'm Wayne Joe, Dealing and Associates.
On this side.
Michael Rennie, IT consultant.
Okay, good, thank you.
Navarro Moore, Chief of Staff, Africa Bureau, State Department.
Jean-Pierre Samou, I'm a university professor in Wisconsin.
Nicole Peacock, U.S. Department of State, Bureau of African Affairs.
Leandro McCready, Business Liberia.
Nasibu Soreva, with the African Development Center.
Calvin Johnson, RockSand Media Inc.
Rebecca
Dennis, Executive Assistant, Government Council.
Frank Gaffon, CG Realty, Dominion Group.
So set. Oh, Jackson George. I am the president of the Liberian Business Association here in the diaspora. So, because of time and the ambassador has to leave in an hour, Mr. Moderator, we will run through some things. Michael, could you do the introduction?
Sure. Well, first I'd like to welcome all of you guys here. My name is Michael Rennie again. I'm on the board of directors for the Liberian Business Association. Usually on Thursdays or once a month, we have our monthly networking meeting. So today is our networking meeting for March. Usually we take that time to network, get to know each other, talk about business opportunities, give reports on the organization, what we're doing, and what we need to do, and get some input from our members. So today we have, the program will be a little bit different as we have a special guest. So there will be some time for question and answer, I guess, and yeah. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let me just go into, I think I had a prepared dialogue for myself, but I think I would just go into some of the things that I want to talk about. Michael just talked about the Business Association. We are a network of business professionals and entrepreneurs. We've come together to identify resources in our community, and we also are organized to see how we can best help our homeland. In Minnesota, there was a workshop, I would say some research done. Just in this locality, we're about 23% immigrant. And I think out of the workshop that was done, we from Concordia University, we contributed $1.6 billion just between Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the suburbs. So you can see that the immigrant community has done a lot here. We do have challenges also as a Liberian Business Association. We lack financing to grow our businesses, and I know we met with ADC the last time, and we're looking at opportunities in which we can do to grow our businesses. We are also looking at how USAID can tap into diaspora Liberians to see how we can work with programs in our country in terms of development. But as you all know, we just transitioned from one government to another, and for the last 12 years, we were protecting the peace, and now we are looking at how we can have economic development in our country. But the economic recovery is slow. We do have the scarcity of employment in our country. About 40%, is estimated that 40% of our population live in extreme poverty. We also have about 40% that live in poverty, and 15% is a working class, and we also have 5% of middle class. Now, our job in the diaspora as business association is how do we help to grow the middle class in Liberia? How do we translate our talent? How do we help our homeland? And so those are some of the things that we really want to talk about today. And so also, Mr. Ambassador, as you know, the issue of deferred enforcement departure is something that is looming. With our contributions, we do have talented Liberians all over this place, and we are hoping that there will be some extension, but and we just wanted to put that in so that you know that our contributions and what we've done. Liberian nationals in the United States contribute immensely to the economic growth. Here, we also have medical doctors, nurses, police officers, military personnel, entrepreneurs, pilots, farmers, engineers, scientists. You name it. We do have that. So, how do we work together in terms of helping our homeland? That's one of the things this business association is focused on. So, our establishment is critical to the economic growth and development of our homeland. And so we want to concentrate, our concentration is more on healthcare, education, ICT, industrial development, agriculture, and infrastructure. Those are the things that we are targeting as Liberians in the diaspora. We are also, we are looking at, largely our investment in Liberia has been remittances and charity and social projects. Largely, that's what we've done. But now we want to be able to transform our contribution to Liberia into more impactful development projects. So one of the things that we also are looking at is how our professionals can help our homeland. And the issue of dual citizenship loans, I think we are working on it on so many different fronts. And we believe that if we have dual citizenship, it will impact our country greatly. That we will be our investment will be protected, and we'll be able to support the economic growth in our homeland. And so, the Liberian Business Association, we are working with the Liberian Business Association in Liberia, the National Investment Commission, and the government to create the enabling environment for us to be able to network and do some business. And so we will need the help of the international community, especially we use it as one of the partners in Liberia. How can use it work with the private sector so that some of the programs that they have in Liberia, we can effect those programs from Liberians who are in the diaspora, who are business owners, that can work with the international community to be able to do some of those things. And so those are some of the things that I wanted to talk about. I know time is short. I don't want to take up most of the time to talk about other things, but as we discuss, I will definitely come back to do that. So in closing, I just want to say thank you for coming and welcome to the Liberian Business Association. We look forward to a dialogue and hopefully a partnership.
Thank you very much.
You. So you want to just I think
kind of go. I guess this is for the recording. So thank you very much for coming out here, and then thank you, sir, for everything, and hopefully we can work together to make this an official consulate registered with the U.S. government, and that will be pushed very quickly when we get back to Washington. So why are we here at the State Department? We do foreign policy. Why would you want to come to Middle America? So this is my 10th time in Minnesota, and I've been to Seattle about a dozen times. I've been also to Alabama, Mississippi, and Ohio and other places to see the diaspora. Why? Because the diaspora is critical. We can't be really good diplomats unless we understand what are in the minds of Americans and thinking about foreign policy issues. And why not go to the diaspora? Because as American citizens, green card holders, you have a stake in Africa in general, Liberia in specifically. And so we need to hear what you're thinking so that we can become better diplomats. And then we can kind of advise you how we can be the conduit towards Africa. So why does Africa matter to the U.S. national strategy? And it is. Africa is important. Asia is important. Europe, Latin America, but Africa in particular. And the reason why is because we want to position ourselves for Africa's future. And, you know, Africa's population growth rate is such that it's going to be 40% of the world's population, 40%. 30% of all the labor force is going to be African. The major consumer for the future is going to be African. The other issue, too, is that if you look at Africa, it is a wealthy continent, and it's the engine for growth for other continents. So if that's going to be the case, we want to make sure that the people, the countries that have the most resources are also going to benefit from it, and that they're not going to be taken advantage of. And so we want to even the playing field. And so in that context, right now is when we were in Congo and other places, we saw a lot of Iranians, Russians, North Koreans, and Chinese, but we didn't see Americans. We didn't see a lot of diaspora people either. And so those are questions about what do we do to be a player. Now, we're not saying that China is the enemy. What we're saying is that China can be coordinated with to meet all the needs, our national strategic interests for the U.S. and also the interests and needs of Africa. So right now Africa has become the source for uranium, titanium, thallium, tungsten, tin, coltan, rare earth minerals, all the metals, energy resources, etc. And so if that's the case, let's be in there and support and develop it rationally. So that's why we're here to listen and then to go overseas to position ourselves. Liberia in specific is really an important country for the United States. It really is a model for the change in Africa taking place. So Africa really is on the march. It's also much more stable than in the past. It's also one of the stable regions of the world, despite what people may think or the image, and that's an image issue. So Liberia had the first free transition government in over 75 years. That's huge. It's huge. We're going to have 20 elections this year in Africa. The biggest one is going to be Nigeria in about a year and a half. But 20 countries having free, fair, open elections. That means that's 20 countries that are not going to transition through coup d'etats and instability. And so we were just saying earlier today is we were doing data collection and saying, in a given year we'll evacuate 19, citizens from 19 countries. And in the 60s and 70s, as Africa was overthrowing colonialism, we were seeing about 10 countries in Africa having evacuation problems. Today, we've had only 4 in the last over a year, 8 in the last 4 years. So very few, and a lot of it is Ebola, it's healthcare issues. It's not through coup d'etats. And then if you look at other countries, they had other continents, there are more evacuations of American citizens. So Africa really is a stable, prosperous continent. The other problem comes in is that you had a lot of outside influence, and that is that the rise of ISIS, Al-Qaeda operations coming in through Africa, trafficking in persons, and the other challenge, of course, is illicit arms flows and drug trafficking. So the problems are coming from outside the continent in. Inside the continent, the biggest challenges are why is it that a lot of people turn to support of ISIS or Shabab or Boko Haram? And the answer is a lot of them is because of jobs. Mm-hmm. And the other issue too is that you have violence is based on people who are abused by the security sectors of those countries. And so what you want to do is create strong institutions, develop economies, have opportunities. And then the final thing, and kind of open up to Q&As, is we got to have a secure and stable financial institutions. And the reason why is because Africa is now becoming highly indebted to countries like China, Russia, Iran. And why? Because when these countries want to build things, the United States, we don't build, we develop. And so that's why we got to be in concert with the Chinese and other countries that do build. But one of the things that we want to moderate is that when countries want to build a road, a bridge, That's right.
That has to come through.
That's right.
Yeah, and the reason, hold on 1 second, the reason why I said path to citizenship, we know extending it is important to that. You can become permanent resident, and then that's the path we're talking about.
Yeah.
But the first thing is that to make sure, because like he said, it's a prerogative of the president.
Exactly.
To make that decision. It's not
To
a congressional thing to
To
happen.
extend it or to not extend it. But
Yes,
the path
yes,
to
which-
citizenship is established through the Immigration Act of 1980. Understand what I mean?
Okay.
Let's not break the dialogue. The point is, we just wanted to, just people understand that it's the prerogative of the president. It's not part of the
Right.
congressional
So
decision.
we know that, and you're correct too, that you can extend it, but you can't do the path. And so the president, has been very clear on, he lumped everything together. And, for better or for worse, he's done that. And so the issue comes in, he's deferred to the U.S. Congress to resolve the issue. That means, for better or for worse, he's not going to take any action. You know that. So the question comes in, if you want the president to extend it, then you better go to the president directly. And the last time I checked, he was elected based on a very strong, tight immigration policy, which states that it's a legal issue to normalize the immigration based on legal laws currently in place. That means a lot of deportations.
And maybe we can talk about it because when I look at the Homeland Security website, it say that the deferred imposed departure is specifically because of foreign relations with the country in which it is designated for. So we can talk about that. With that, let's talk about other things. How about that?
Yeah, this then.
Okay. So is there a question on the floor?
Can I just, go ahead, but.
Thank you, sir, for taking your time to meet with us. And thank you on the board for making this intervention. I make a living by encouraging foreign nationals to put some investment in our country. So, having said that, you mentioned two things that capture the issue of predatory lending and your recognition of Africa being a new frontier. I would like to understand from your perspective, what are some of the competitive business action you guys are putting in place so as to drive us away from looking at people or countries vis-a-vis with the issue of predatory lending? Because, to speak to the truth, we need these things to keep our people up and running economically.
Sure.
So what are you guys doing?
Before you answer, Basket, can we take another?
Yeah.
Okay, is there another question that we can add to that, so you can just address that? Another question?
Well, what I wanted to find out, what role currently the U.S. Government is playing in the transition process of Liberia. I know China right now is spreading everywhere in Africa, but in addition to what he said, I mean, for us, like for me, I get it. I mean, I've always been, an advocate of the U.S. system. It's like if you want to empower this nation, you give it to the people. They go through that. Some of them get jobs, they get money, they get, develop. And for example, we hear businesses willing to go back home or then going to found a Chinese business. I mean, we get that, but with the U.S., I don't know much about it, but this is a really good idea you brought. It's just that if you can give us an idea what we can do, that would be great.
Yeah. Okay. So going back to, it's really kind of, you raised a lot of issues and challenges, so how do you organize this? So for the United States is, giving to Liberia specifically is a critical issue. So USAID has 3 hubs for trade promotion and sector identification. So why AID? Because it's as much a development issue as it is a trade issue. Because in order to develop the continent, we feel that you need to emphasize and stress trade. So I'll give you a kind of example. So going back to Ethiopia, I was the ambassador. So Ethiopia, poor country, 156 on the poverty index level, procured almost $5 billion in Boeing aircraft. That means they just saved 35,000 American jobs. So the question comes in is, what did we do for Ethiopia? Because in order to make money, you got to spend money, and you got to invest. Because what happens is, as you invest, then you can create more jobs. So it's in some ways counterintuitive, and it's something that AID has, and what we're trying to achieve. So in other words, so when you create jobs, you increase wealth, what do Africans normally tend to do? They're going to buy capital goods. I mean, they're not going to go out to China and buy consumer goods. They will, but the bottom line is they're going to try to increase wealth, which means they're going to buy capital goods. And where do they go for capital goods? It's going to be the United States. And so we found out that what USAID has done is they send their teams out, and it's based in Kenya, South Africa, and Ghana. And what we've done is we look at each country and their sectors in which they have the comparative advantage. And then based on that, we try to find a market. So for Uganda, Ethiopia, Rwanda, Burundi, South Africa, a lot of things is leather products, textiles, and specialty food items. And so by doing that, we've been able to create thousands of jobs. By creating thousands of jobs, that means you increase the wealth. And that means you're giving more foreign exchange reserves in their pockets. And then the end result is that they turn around and they've increased the importation and procurement of U.S. goods and services. So the end result is that we've been able to increase the amount of trade from the United States to Africa exponentially, not only because of AGOA, but primarily because of the sector selective of stimulus that we put in by USAID. And so we've gone on exports, we've gone up to over almost $35 billion from the United States. And then imports from Africa is still $11 billion, so it's very low. But direct investments from the U.S. to Africa is about $57 billion, which is still low. So you're talking about, 3%, 2% of our total trade. And, the United States is one of the least globalized countries in the world. I mean, it's not that, we're number 100 out of 140. And about 15 to 20% of our total GDP comes from trade, which is very low compared to other countries. And so you guys are going to be important in building that up, because as we build up globalization of the country, then we're able to increase trade. We're also able to increase the wealth of countries like Liberia through the trade investment. So that's one of the things that we're looking at. The Department of Commerce is supposed to be the leader in trade, but they're focused on Asia and developed markets. And what we're trying to say is, no, you really got to work on Africa. But they've downsized their services, et cetera. So they did increase and opened an office in Ethiopia and Senegal, but still is the main focal point has to be USAID and also the embassies. So we have 46 embassies, and our charge now is to promote trade and expand investment. So then going back to your question is, what is it that we need to do to increase this trade with Liberia? And that really is a question. So we need to work with AID, look at the sectors in which we have a comparative advantage, look at areas where we can link up with, well, I'll tell you, we'll link up with China, we'll link up with any country, Japan, Korea, in order to develop that. And the reason why is because everyone has to play a role, and we want everyone to play a positive role. So I'll give you one more example is that, so what is it? So we, as the United States, we don't build things. We're not good at building. What we do good in things is that we develop things. So we do girls' education, we do education in general, we do healthcare, and we also do development of the youth. And why is that important? Because 70% of Africa is under 30, and by 2050 they'll be under 25. So it's a very youthful population, and you got to create jobs. You got to meet the needs of the youth. And so through girls' education, to this day, we have 66% of all girls in Africa have gone through basic education, but only 34% have gone through secondary education, and very few have gone through advanced education. And what we learned is that the higher the rate of education of girls and more entrepreneur for women, the higher rate of economic development. And that's what we need to do, and that's what we had to achieve. And that's going to be forever. So the Chinese can build a road, but in a couple of years it's going to be, it's going to collapse. Yeah, right. But education is going to be forever. So therefore, why don't we just work together? And I'll give you an example of what, so I did a lot of construction when I was a young officer. And, you know, when you do ties between rebars, you don't do it 5 feet apart like the Chinese would do on a road. You do it every 6 inches because that will tighten it up, and then you don't have any degradation, and it becomes very good. So those are some of the things that we told our Chinese colleagues that, yeah, okay, so instead of doing in a 2 months build a road, why don't you take a year to do a good road that's going to last for decades? I mean, maybe for a century. Let's do that way. So I think there's room for discussions and exponential. And actually what we've kind of directed the Chinese to do is to build roads and infrastructures that benefit our programs and projects. And then that helps too. The other thing too that we've done is the number of level 1 airports has increased. We're now up to 6 in Africa. Why is the level 1 airport critical? Because once you have a level 1 airport, then you meet all the homeland security issues and also the ability to ship things directly to the United States. That's why you need a level 1 airport. That's critical. And so Liberia has, what does Liberia have? They have the longest runway on God's green earth. Not only is it a long runway, it is one of the best runways.
Wow.
It's very well constructed. And because of that, why don't you take advantage of it? The other thing too is Liberia needs to control that airport for monetary purposes and for also trade and investment. So you can manage it or have an outside company manage it, but you better take control of it. And the examples we see in other parts of Africa is that other countries dominate it and they get the benefits. So, and that's denying taxes and import duties, et cetera, to the country. So therefore, when you get back, you got to tell George Weah, you got to control, because that is a national asset. The other issue is the port facility. So the airport and port go hand in hand. So that's what we're trying to do for Liberia, and that's going to be our focal point. And you know, and George Weah now represents the new Africa. Why? Because he was the youth. The youth is not going to sit around and wait for these old-timers to continue running, you know, term after term after term after term. You know, that's not going to happen. And so George Weah, really, he has 6 months to show some positive effect. And so it's in our U.S. national interest to make sure he succeeds. Because if he succeeds, we succeed. We got to make him succeed. So we're focused on this. You know, I've been to Liberia. I cannot tell you how many times. I mean, I was Charles Taylor. Oh my goodness! And yeah, I was there with Judy Bryant. You know, Judy Bryant said all the good words, and it didn't come out. And then Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. You know, that's great. And then and now with George Weah, and of course, I was just saying his son now has made the U.S. national team. Thank goodness, because our soccer team really needs help. And I was just saying a human story about my personal ties to Liberia. So my daughter is a cadet at West Point. She's a third year and a commander for her squad. And in her squad is the first Liberian cadet at West Point, a guy named Cadet Scott. What a great guy. I mean, guy's brilliant. And he's typical of the young youth of Liberia, but also of the world. And he wants better. He's demanding better. And just talking to Cadet Scott, I said, "Gee, this guy is a genius. He's smart." And thank God my daughter is his commander.
Well, let's get a couple more questions.
Yeah, sorry.
Just a follow-up. Ambassador, sorry, gentlemen. I would just want to ask on behalf of my compatriots one simple, small favor. It's based on my experience working with people who has interest in investment proposals in Liberia. Can you guys do something that will boost the country's morale when it comes to investors making a decision? Because every time they want to make an investment, they have this negative perception of Liberia.
Yeah.
So we very much appreciate that you said that you want Mr. Weah to succeed.
That's not just Liberia, it's all of Africa. Yeah.
One of the things that I wanted to talk about, we are working on an investment forum, wherein we will bring in government agencies and autonomous agencies and businesses from Liberia, and we also want to bring in investors from the U.S. to have this big, I would call it symposium or forum, where Liberian businesses can meet investors, where we as Liberian business owners in the diaspora can also meet, so we can start forging a relationship to do investment in Liberia. So, I mean, the State Department will be great partner in helping us to get the kind of investors we need around the table to be able to effect that kind of a partnership in Liberia.
So here's what you do. Is it going to be in June, Navarro? Is the AGOA Summit? Or it could be August. Yeah, so anyway, AGOA Summit is every other year is in the U.S. This year is in Washington, D.C. And then we're going to follow it with the YALI Summit, which is the youth group. And the youth group, we have 500,000 young Africans organized in every country in Africa. And these are the best, the brightest, the smartest people, including Liberia. And these kids are just geniuses, and they're the face of change of Africa. And that's why this is going to be America's really big step in Africa. But the AGOA Summit, that's going to match up investors and look at how we can do it. So your embassy in Washington better be honest. You got to put your A game. It's going to be an A game operation. You got to go in there and you got to be very aggressive. You're going to have to identify the sectors where Liberia has the advantages. And what sectors do you have? Forget about rubber.
We have the mining sector.
That's right.
It's a green field.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
the entire extractive industry for that matter.
yeah, but you got to be more than extractive. You got to look at your core asset, your people. Yeah.
Resource development.
I think that's something
Yeah,
definitely
we could talk offline on this, and we're going to work with your Consul General here. But we are committed to Liberia. Liberia, you got 6 months, you got to start working, you got to show some progress.
That's the
results.
key. Any
Yes.
other questions? Okay, you have a question, and then somebody else here? You have one. Okay, why don't you ask a
Mine is not
question?
necessarily a question, but probably a suggestion. I know you talked about the fact that, so these African countries go to China and Russia and get these predatory loans, and then these organizations, these countries will give the money to their banks, the banks hire their companies to go down to Liberia or Africa and carry out the job. I was wondering if there's any possibility where the State Department who work with USAID and when they're giving these programs and these loans or funding out, they could put some regulations or demand in that the contracts or be carried out by Liberian-owned businesses or businesses native to that country. Is that something that's done, or that's something that you guys could help out with?
Yeah, that we can help with, but the bottom line is you're going to need the countries, and then when you got to act tough on the negotiations. Right now, we're seeing the re-indebtedness of Africa, and to the tune of anywhere from 50% to 100% of GDP debt based on loans. That's for all of us who worked on HIPAA debt relief, that's outrageous. That's immoral. It's unethical. You're impoverishing Africa. That's a new type of colonial subjugation. That's awful. And that's one of the things that we're trying to fight against. So you got to just push back. And that's, I think, one of the, I call it probably the next evil that you have to fight against.
So, well, let's take
10 more minutes. 10 more minutes.
Ambassador, we met earlier this morning. One of the concern that is only a concern, some of the major difficulties that we have as business people in Africa is the fact that we don't have access to especially the venture capital in the U.S.
Right.
How can we have, I think venture capital, especially for us business people, is very strategic.
That's right.
In terms of some of the bigger projects that we want to carry out in Liberia. We want to go out in the equity market to raise money, so to go and build some of the infrastructures like you're talking about the airport and those kind of things, so we can engage in some of those things without actually going to the government. If we ourselves start doing that, then we don't have to worry about the move from Russia, from China, and all those things, because we have the ability to raise those capital and do it ourselves. So how can we have access to some of these funding from the U.S.? Because once you say Africa, I'm going to build this in Africa, everybody's like, oh my goodness, they're going to steal my money and I'm never going to get a return. Those are some of the things that we go through when we're trying to raise, when we go to the capital market. Right. How can we break?
So here's the issue so what is the United States doing right now? And it was started under the last administration, but it goes down to the Clinton, to the Bush, to the Obama administrations. And this administration, we're trying to continue. And that is, what is it that Africa needs? They need education. So what are the levers for development? It's a high savings rate, education, infrastructure, and access to resources. So China's doing the infrastructure because we don't do that. We're doing the education and the know-how. So the issue comes in is on the access to resources. And so those are things that we need to work with all the other countries and also the African states. But we also got to do is we have to listen. Because we just can't go into Liberia and say, we're going to do this. No. Liberia knows exactly what it wants.
Correct.
I mean, you talk to any Liberian, I mean, they know exactly what needs to be done. And so therefore, we need to listen and address those needs and address it. And also the sectors in which they have. It's not just extractive industries. It's going to be industrialization. So here's the issue. So 70% of Africa is agriculture. And the normal development is going to industrialization and then service. What's happening now is that we're having minimal industrialization and then going directly to service. The problem with service is that you don't accrue as much wealth unless you have a strong industrial base. So the question comes in, is this a new model or should we be doing a different model? Now, if you go to Ireland or the Scandinavian countries, they didn't go through industrialization. They went directly into high-tech service providing. And that's really high, a lot of benefits. Is that the model for Africa? Can we do that in Africa? And then the other issue, too, with high birth rates and high growth rates in the population, we're going to have to create jobs at an astronomical rate. So in the year 2100, if you have 40% of the population is African, how many jobs do you got to create every week, every day, every hour, every minute, every second? How many jobs do you got to create every blessed second? That's what you're talking about. Just put that in the back of your mind. So you better develop your industries now, because 2100 is right around the corner, but it's too late. You got to think of it today, now. And we need you, and we need the people of Liberia. So a lot of questions, but I'm sure the young people have the answers.
Okay, we have about five minutes to the meeting, so I still want to get in at least one or two questions, and then.
How about a lady?
Lady, any questions, John? Well, I know, I'm just saying, yeah.
Gender equity, we need that.
You want to ask a question?
I'm not sure if this still exists, but in the past, didn't USAID have loans that you had to partner with a U.S. citizen if they had 25%?
Oh, that's for visas?
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
They don't have them anymore?
No, I mean, one of the things we have MCC, which is the Millennium Challenge Corporation. So we've identified 12 countries that are doing the right things on sectors. But a lot of the companies that they've hired is not American companies. We're trying to get American companies in infrastructure development. But in overall education, healthcare, that's American. That's good. But as far as linking up and partnering up, yeah, you got to be careful with the laws of the countries that you're in. But again, the United States will be there to back and support. Our 46 embassies and 6 consulates are going to be right. That's our job. That's your job, too, here in the United States.
Correct.
Identify. I mean, so we're going to partner up with you.
Okay, great.
Any other questions?
Yeah,
So that will be the last question, okay?
Just one more. Given the fact that most of the African countries, what is happening right now in Africa with China kind of taking advantage with these predatory loans, if American policy is to develop and not build, and most of these African countries see infrastructure very key to economic recovery, how can't China step in when America is not apparently stepping in?
So that's why we have to partner up and talk. So we're invited the Chinese to discuss how we can do closer coordination and cooperation, because again, they're not the enemy. In fact, we encourage China to invest in these countries, and we use the word invest, not take out, invest, put money in, put into the economy, let the economy grow. That's what we want to do. We want to do, so, we've met with really smart Nobel laureates, et cetera, like Joseph Stiglitz, we did Jeffrey Sachs, we did other people in development. And, and the bottom line is those models, and they don't all have the answers too, but they make a lot of common sense issues. And the common sense is you develop the people. That's what the U.S. is doing, developing your core asset, your people skills. And then the other issue, too, is looking at investments and a flow of monies, and then looking at concentration of of resources and assets. And so there's a lot of models coming out, and we don't have the answers, but we got to try something and try everything to look at the development process. Because I think maybe one thing that's really interesting is that you're seeing a lot of mega cities growing up in Asia and Middle East, et cetera. But in Africa, you're not seeing that. You're seeing super mega cities growing up. In other words, you're seeing the Lagos being the key city that's going to grow, Nairobi, Addis, Dakar, et cetera. So instead of a lot of smaller cities growing up, it's just one mega city. Is that a new model? Why is that happening in Africa? You know, what's different? And I don't have the answers, but those are some of the questions we're asking. And so you're going to give us the answers, because you're a young guy. I know you.
Okay, with that, probably the chairman of the board is going to do
Well,
the vote of thanks.
before the chairman do the vote of thanks, Ambassador, I just wanted to know that the Business Association here, we've worked hard to identify most of the resources in our community. Like I said, we got doctors, lawyers, entrepreneurs, we got everything it takes. What we are looking for is how we can partner with investors, or even ourselves being investors. We are looking at an investment group to put together and help. And so we will be working with your office. We will be working with State Department, hoping that we can attract the kind of investment we need to develop our country. We need jobs. We got a lot of young people, and the Liberian Business Association has made it one of its duty to create jobs in Liberia. We need 100,000 jobs in the 6 years from the diaspora, and that's what we're working on. So, oh no.
I just wanted to add to what he just said. Okay, you talked about the resources that will be available, talking about education, educating people. I have a travel and tourism company. I'm about to open a tourism office in Liberia. But one of the things again is education, educating the people there. So if I want to get few people in Liberia to come and do tourism training, will your office be able to guide us to where we can go to look for the scholarship? Because one of the problem I have with the people in Liberia is the education. Most of them don't know about the tourism business. So we want to go back just to make sure we educate them, and we need a great help on that. My office is a small business. I can't afford to do that, but definitely I will need to bring the people abroad to get more education on the travel industry. It's a huge market for us. The market, as you can see, tourism is a very big business all around the world, and we have the Atlantic Ocean, so we are thinking seriously about that. So how can the office help us to get some resources to help our people that would like to bring more country?
Yeah, and that's that. You asked a great question, because that's hard. We don't have like a one-stop shopping, and it's going to be kind of diffuse. But and you have to look at it. But if you have a Cadet Scott at West Point who's doing amazing things, and he's like one of hundreds and hundreds of young Liberians who have that skill set. Boy, that's great. It's amazing. So the issue comes in is like the YALI program. So we had 74,000 applicants we had from Liberia as well. I was just amazed at the quality of applicants coming out of Liberia. So they're out there. You just got to develop it. And then the issue comes in is that I think Liberia could go for MCC. And if once you MCC designated, that means you're one of the top 12 countries, forget Africa, in all the developing countries around the world. That's a gold label. And then once you get MCC, you can go into other areas. And it attracts investments. I mean, look at all the other countries who received MCC. It's just remarkable development in progress.
I think people are asking what is MCC?
Millennium Challenge Corporation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Part of the U.S. government.
Okay.
All right, we're not going to stay all
Yeah,
evening.
that's
No.
great. You guys are awesome. Thank you.
Frank, you can.
Okay. Mr. Ambassador, I want to thank you for coming with your guest. We are very honored to have you here this evening. And I also want to thank each and every one of you for coming, because we believe that this is very informative. Yes, very informative meeting, and we look forward to working with your institution on a lot of the things that we have discussed here this evening. One of the things that Jeannie talked about is the trade and investment aspect, especially when we talk about the travel industry. I believe that one of the things that we need to foster is having people to go to Liberia and see the beauty of Liberia. And also they can think about investments also as they are visiting and seeing the natural resources and so forth. So we will be asking like the Jennings and other travel agencies to continue to foster that. So we just want to thank everyone for coming this evening. You are very welcome. We have few refreshments. Feel very free to join us in our light refreshments.
So let me just add one caveat. So Liberia did get an MCC threshold because we built the power generation. Power project. So Liberia is a Class A level investment destination. So therefore, what the issue comes in, you got to get a second compact.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if we got the destination.
No, I think it was a threshold,
Yeah, we definitely-
because you got the $350 million project grant, so that was great. But I mean, can you imagine? It's a great power generation plant.
I work with the MCC. I work with that looming.
Oh, yeah.
Looming, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay,
Well, thank you again.
Let's give the ambassador a hand.
Could we just take a picture with you, Ambassador?
Oh, sure.
Could you guys just come by and we can take a quick picture? The Ambassador got to go.
Thank you so much.
And singing, boy,
You guys want to come? The Ambassador got to go. Right here.
So everybody else come in?
Ernest, you get it? You get me? Ernest!
You got 2 minutes, 30 seconds.